Hello and welcome to day 24 of the federal election campaign. Right now, the leaders are all in and around Montreal because tomorrow the debates are starting. And just a little reminder that I'll be live on Twitch for both debates, so make sure you go over and check it out because I would love to hang out with you while we act like huge nerds. And if you want to make sure it works, I'm going to be live tonight too, so come find me. One of the big questions on everyone's minds for tomorrow is how is Carney going to do, because he's definitely the leader with the weakest French. But when asked if he's nervous today, Carney had this to say.
How nervous are you?
I look forward to the debate.
Meanwhile, as usual, one of the dominating stories of the day was Trump's tariffs. Japanese media outlet reported that Honda is thinking of moving some auto production out of Canada. Now, Doug Ford has already come out and said that these reports are inaccurate and that he spoke to the head of Honda Canada today. But just the rumor and all of the fear that it caused got people talking and thinking about Trump's tariffs again today. Mark Carney, who was speaking at a bus manufacturing plant in a suburb of Montreal today, kicked off his remarks with his usual sort of tough on Trump warning.
President Trump is trying to fundamentally restructure the international trading system. In the process, he's rupturing the global economy. And that 80-year period when the United States embraced the mantle of global economic leadership, when it forged alliances rooted in trust and mutual respect, and championed the free and open exchange of goods and services and ideas, is over. There is no going back.
And later, when Carney was specifically pressed on the Honda news, he said that this is a war.
The U.S., President Trump's tariffs are attacking our auto industry. And, well, we can protect our workers, and we will, and we've taken steps. Well, we can provide incentives for the production to maintain here, which we have, and the announcement of the remission order today will show that clearly. Well, we can provide funds, which we will do if we are elected, for strategic adjustment in the industry. It's a war, and we can't provide guarantees for every situation. And that just underscores how important it is, the negotiation with the U.S. president, and who is going to be across the table for that, for a global approach, who knows how to get the deal that will build out for our auto industry and other industries in Canada. Thank you.
Poilievre was also asked about the counter tariffs that Canada has on autos today, whether we should drop them to try to relieve some of the pressure on the auto industry, and he said we should not lift our counter tariffs. I'll have more on Poilievre's stuff from today in a second, but first let's finish up the Carney announcement. Today, the Liberal leader announced a new sector-specific mid-career training and upskilling benefit in what he called priority sectors, so that includes manufacturing, construction, tech, and AI. This would provide up to $15,000 per Canadian for training, he said. Carney also took a bunch of questions, not just 4 with no follow-ups, and he said a few interesting things in those responses. So just quickly, he was pressed on the lack of climate policy from him on the campaign trail, but he pushed back on that premise, pointing to his announcement of a nature plan in Victoria. And he also suggested that some of his other non-climate specific announcements, like his housing plan, have positive climate impacts as well. And he also, in response to another question, said that the costed Liberal platform will be dropped soon, definitely before the advanced polls close. Poilievre, meanwhile, was in Montreal today, and he gave an announcement on fraud protections for seniors. He said his government would pass the Stop Scamming Seniors Act, which he said would put a bunch of requirements in place for banks and telecom companies to tackle fraud targeting seniors, as well as include some mandatory jail time and massive minimum fines for this kind of fraud. Poilievre also gave us an iconic clip today. I have to give you some context first. Basically, he was misrepresenting something that Carney had said yesterday, because Poilievre announced yesterday that he would invoke the Notwithstanding clause to overturn a Supreme Court ruling. That ruling found that a Harper-era policy allowing judges to hand out consecutive 25-year blocks of parole ineligibility in cases of multiple first-degree murders violated the Charter and were, quote, intrinsically incompatible with human dignity. Now, the Notwithstanding clause is a clause in the Charter that gives prime ministers and premiers the power to override certain portions of the Charter, so override certain rights and freedoms for 5-year terms when passing legislation. Poilievre said yesterday that he would be willing to use this clause to overturn that Supreme Court decision I mentioned, and also more broadly to, quote, fight crime. No federal government has ever used this clause, so he would be the first prime minister to do so. It has, however, been used increasingly, concerningly, at the provincial level. Anyways, that's a lot of context, but it's important because Mark Carney called this promised use of the notwithstanding clause, quote, dangerous. But today, Poilievre took that comment from Carney and twisted it. He made it sound like what Carney was calling dangerous wasn't the invocation of the notwithstanding clause in general, but rather the specific issue that Poilievre wanted to invoke it for, which is jailing multiple murders for extended periods of time without parole eligibility. That specific thing is not what Carney was calling dangerous. He was talking about the invocation of the notwithstanding clause. But then Poilievre said this, which I think I might quote like forever. Enjoy.
Yesterday, Mark Carney said it was dangerous to keep multiple murderers in jail for life. Mr. Carney, do you know what's dangerous? Murder is dangerous.
Yeah, you know what's dangerous? Murder is dangerous. I mean, fact check. True. Moving on. Poilievre also reiterated his promise to defund the CBC, but also in some way that hasn't been clearly explained, continue to fund Radio-Canada, which is French CBC, so yeah. And the last interesting thing that I'll flag from Poilievre's press conference today is he was asked to explain concretely what he means when he said that he'd end woke culture in the public service and in the military. And he didn't really have a clear answer. He mostly just dialed up the talking points to 100. Take a listen.
I was wondering if you could tell us what you mean concretely when you say you'll end woke culture in the public service and the military.
Very simply, after a lost Liberal decade of dividing Canadians, turning people against each other, and weakening our armed forces, we need to put Canada first. We need to unite all Canadians around our common promise, a promise that hard work gets you a great life on a safe street, and by the way, in an affordable home under our proud flag. Unfortunately, the Liberals have been distracted from that mission. I think of, for example, their woke criminal justice agenda.
Meanwhile, the NDP was also in Montreal today going after both the Liberals and the Conservatives over their plans to scrap the capital gains tax increase. And there are a few notable headlines from the last 24 hours that I also want to mention. Deputy Conservative leader Melissa Lantsman made the headlines because it turns out she invested in Brookfield while she was also attacking Mark Carney for running the investment giant. So, yeah, that's interesting. The IGF also reported that at least 7 Conservative MPs held stock in Brookfield. Meanwhile, in Burlington, former Liberal leadership hopeful and current Liberal candidate Karina Gould posted on her socials that an all-candidate meeting in her riding had to be cancelled. Apparently, it was cancelled due to a planned convoy protest that was deemed likely to disrupt the meeting in some way. So now, because of those concerns, the local people in that riding don't get to hear directly from the folks who are vying for their vote. So that's great. The last thing I want to note is something that I didn't include in yesterday's video, but I should have because it's really important and it happened over the weekend. Pierre Poilievre made a promise on Saturday to deport anyone on a visitor visa who, quote, carries out law breaking. But he said that right after, when he was pressed about pro-Palestine protests, he had vowed to bring in tougher laws to target vandalism and what he called hate marches. Take a listen.
We will bring in tougher laws to target vandalism, hate marches that break laws, violent attacks based on ethnicity and religion. Anyone who's here on a visitor visa who carries out law breaking will be deported from this country, and there will be very serious jail time, and on top of that, fines for anyone who carries out anti-Semitic vandalism or property damage. We need to unite our people.
Yeah, given the immigration attacks we're seeing on folks who protested for Palestine in the US right now, if Poilievre is trying not to sound like the Trump administration, he's not doing a great job here. Anyways, that's it for today's update. I will be back tomorrow with the latest from the election campaign. And make sure you check out my Twitch channel because, again, I'm going to be live tonight at 7 p.m. just for my usual hang. And then on Wednesday and Thursday for those leadership debates that I mentioned at the beginning of the video. Until then, what do you think of all of this?